what we can talk about this. So,
All right.
um, hey everyone, welcome to another Run Wild with Us. Ask Us Anything. I'm Lisa Kastner. I'm the founder and executive editor for Running Wild and RIZE. I'm here every week with the likes of Peter Wright, one of our absolutely phenomenal acquisition editors, and uh, again, like broad stroke editors as well. And we're here to answer any kind of questions that you may have. Again, every week on Thursdays, although we probably won't be here on Thanksgiving. um, at 5 p.m. Pacific time, 8 p.m. Eastern time. And if you have any kind of questions for us, you can go ahead, toss your question into the comments section. And what we typically do is we'll repeat the question and then respond to it. So if you're watching this and it's the recording, that isn't a big deal. You can always just go ahead and put your comments in the comments section or questions rather. And I will typically go back and respond to them the subsequent week. So with that, Caroline says, great to see you. Great to see you too, as always. Thank you for joining us every week. It's just really phenomenal. So we actually, right before we joined, guys, we were just talking about the election results. And I'm sure right now, either a whole lot of people are going to go like, ah, and run away, or, possibly join. So, but yeah, so we were going to cover that a little bit. Caroline says, so how was your week, Peter and Lisa? So, how about you? How
My
was your
week's
week?
my week's been pretty good. Pretty good. The novel I'm working on is I found a new angle that I want to pursue with the writing of it and the characters of it. It sounds really
Oh,
exciting. I'm
cool.
really eager to tackle that this evening. The day job is slowing down a little bit, so I'm able to work on some editing through the downtime, which is always a bonus because it's a better use of my time and it
Mm,
enables me to get through more books, kind of
mm,
thing. And the book that I'm editing, and I've talked about this before, but what amazes me, the thought that came to me today, was that I'm reading through the book. I'm on page 200 out of a 265 page book.
mm-hmm.
Okay, and the writing was good to begin with. That's why I selected it, and I'm dedicating my work to it,
Yeah.
or dedicating myself to it. But the parts that I'm reading now were kind of flat first time I read it.
Huh.
I mean, it didn't really ring true. The images were there. I mean, I'm looking at the first version. I'm looking at the second version, comparing them. The writing was the same. It's
Mm-hmm.
just the chapters leading up to this point, leading up to page 200, weren't fully realized, weren't fully colorized, and weren't fully
Mm,
explored emotionally. Now
mhm,
that the author has explored those emotionally and added the color and added the images, the second half of the book and the third last quarter of the book is phenomenal. It's exciting. You're really keyed into what's going on because everything builds up to it, and then we get the whole climax at the end. It's fantastic, fantastic. That's why it's so important to have everything in place. That's why it's so important to have an editor, not me, but have an editor
yeah,
just point things out that you might not realize or notice, kind of thing.
yep,
It's a huge
absolutely, absolutely. That's phenomenal. I'm really
difference. Mhm.
excited to read the final version. That's
It's
awesome.
really
So,
good.
yeah, and my week's been fine. Admittedly, this morning I woke up with dehydration, so I'm still recovering from that. I guess that just means I haven't been drinking enough water the last couple of days, but I'm slowly getting over it. Um, and I actually I've had a couple of really interesting exchanges. Exchanges is the wrong word. Questions, because we put out offers to several authors in the last couple of weeks, and I've had a few come back and ask me, um, like explicitly, what are the anticipated edits on the work. Right, and they haven't we don't have a contract yet. We haven't There's no agreement yet. So it's that's highly unusual. If you've never signed with a publisher before, you're always assigned an editor. Actually, in most houses, actually the large houses, you would be assigned both an overall editor and a copy editor, right? And to do like a final cleanup. And they don't, no one that I'm aware of comes back to you before there's a contract in place, because oftentimes you're not even assigned an editor until that contract is in place, because it wouldn't make sense, right? Because that individual could be working on, like, a dozen other pieces, or a dozen other potential stories. So I understand the anxiety at the thought of, like, oh my gosh, I've been working on this for years or however long, and they're mentioning that I'm going to be assigned an editor. If you don't want an editor, then just, and I don't mean this in a flippant way, just self publish it, because I don't know of a single publisher, a single credible publisher that is going to um go ahead and publish your work without having you be assigned an editor, without you working with that collaborative editor on the piece. Now, that said, my suggestion is, if you do want to go with a small press or a mid-sized press or a large press that is reputable, and you're comfortable with that publisher, my recommendation is, um, either A, go ahead and sign the contract, and then ask for ask for a specific editor, right? Because you can do that. There's nothing wrong with doing that. You can also just basically wait and see until who's assigned to you. And when that individual is assigned to you, then meet up with them and ask them, what is your editorial style? Because admittedly, every editor has a slightly different style. And even though we only bring on editors who are collaborative, um, one author may be more comfortable with, Amy's style versus, Peters or whatever. I'm clearly making this up. But, just, really kind of keep that in mind. Because what I'm finding happening is, I'm in the conversation, the person will say, oh, well, I don't, uh, I've never signed a contract before, but I don't want to sign one unless I know what all the edits are going to be. Again, especially for a long work, I don't know of anyone who is going to any house that's going to do that. I don't know. Peter, have you had a different experience?
No, because the time commitment on the editor is huge. I have had a couple stories that the authors said they accepted the contract. I did the full edit, and I brought it back to the readers. The readers or the author's like, I never signed a contract, and then they're gone with their manuscript. So all
Oh,
the energy I've invested in their story, I mean, it's because Running Wild doesn't profit from it, so that there's no real reason to do it. So I think that's pretty. I don't think we would accept a manuscript by them in the future, just because that's
no,
not cool.
no, and we do. We've had a couple that are like, people who've signed. They went through the entire editing process, and then right before it was ready to go to market, they turned around and said, "You know what? I've changed my mind." Again, to Peter's point, and in all honesty, there is a clause that either, within the contract, there is a clause that either we can cut bait or the author can cut bait, but that's, excuse me, that's also in good faith, because that's with the expectation that all this tremendous work that both the editor and the author are putting forward, each other's going to value and implement to help ensure that the story is realized, right?
Mm.
Exactly what Peter was describing at the very beginning of this. So, and that's just really, really bad form. If you sign with a publisher and you turn around and like I said, you sign the contract and then you turn around, and unless you've got really good reason um, to cut bait, uh, they most likely will never look at your work again. They won't consider it seriously because that is a huge time commitment. It's a financial commitment. Um, I mean, I can just list off all of the different ways that it really is not. It's not great, especially for again a smaller mid-sized press because they don't have hundreds of people on staff or thousands of people on staff.
So
So.
that's happened to you in the past, didn't mean to interrupt, but this happened to you in the past where you'll accept a manuscript and then this cascaded demands comes in maybe their first book or their second book, and their demands are outrageous. How
Mhm.
often does that happen? More, I've heard a couple stories from you, but does that happen often?
It does not. I'd
That's
say
good.
maybe like 10%, something like
All right.
that. Usually it's um it's typically with someone who they've been working on the manuscript for, like 10, 15 years, so they're really nervous about putting it out there. And for whatever reason, they, you know, like just freak out before you get to the production point, or sometimes we actually start the production point, and it's just about to get submitted to our distributor, and they decide they don't want to do it anymore.
Mm.
In terms of ones who like they have follow-up books, um we have had a couple of people, not many, we've had a couple of people who they worked with us in the past, and I guess they really enjoyed the process, and so they came forward. And usually, they submit the work in the more standard way, and they don't expect us to pick it up. They just let us know that, hey, I'd really love to, I'd love it if you guys published my follow up, so forth and so on.
Mm.
Um, we have had one or two though who they just kind of assumed that because we published the previous work, we would publish the follow-up. Um, and no, too. I mean, I've told this story before as well. We've had instances where, like, a huge bestseller submits their work to us, but it's a book that they wrote before the huge bestseller, and so it's not quite realized yet. But they feel as though it is. And again, that hasn't been frequent. It's been quite infrequent. But yeah. So yeah, we get weird stuff like that. Again, it's not the majority. Um oh, and that's another thing. And Rod, I'll address your question in a minute. Um Another thing to be aware of, if you are a totally, you've never worked with a publisher before, and or you've never been under contract. Um I know the internet is ripe with a lot of misinformation. I mean, crazy amounts of misinformation. Do me a favor, guys. Pull in either an agent or some kind of uh like entertainment lawyer or publishing lawyer, something like that, to go over the contract. Because what's happened a few times, and it seems to be more frequent, which just tells me there's a lot more misinformation out there. Um, the author will come back and say, well, I deserve like 70% of retail. Well, we don't even see 70% of retail. I mean, that, you know, and when I try and kind of work through it with the author, that's when I find out that there's like some website that they follow or a podcast that they follow that gave them a lot of information, but it was probably information that was relevant if you're self publishing, or like doing direct to consumer type stuff. So just really, you know, really do your homework, really pull in folks who can help you do an intelligent analysis, because you're getting all upset over something that doesn't make sense. And, I hate to see individuals lose opportunities, based on misinformation. So, um, let's see. Rod Gilly says, "Hi, hi. I am such a new writer. I know very little about the process. From the time a short story is accepted, does it typically take a lot of time to match the writer's story with an editor?" I don't know. Do you want to take that or no?
No, you've got. I mean, from my perspective as acquisitions editor, we know what types of books and stories certain editors prefer over others. Some prefer genre fiction, some prefer literary fiction. It just gets to know your team of editors as a whole. I don't have the breadth of knowledge that Lisa has in terms of all the editors with the press, but you just get a feel, and you reach out to them and say, "Is this something you might be interested in?" So it could take anywhere from a couple days to a couple weeks, depending on how busy the editor is.
When Rod, just to piggyback on what Peter's saying, for short stories, we don't assign a unique editor per short story. We assign an editor for the collection or for that anthology. Um, and usually, we let and if someone raises their hand and says they're willing to edit an anthology, we'll do a first pass at stories to cover, and then we ask them to go over it and make sure they're comfortable with it. And then usually, and although I think Peter got sucker punched in the past, uh, but and then they make a final choice. But it we don't do the same kind of editor matching that we do for a long form like a memoir or a novel, that we do for a short story that's going into one of our anthologies. Now, if it's a short story collection and it's a single author, then that's different. That one we do try and match up the a good editor um with the work. And in terms of how much time it takes, it really depends on our editor's availability and their well, yeah, I mean, honestly, that's pretty much it. It depends on their availability. Like right now, we have, I think it's like 5 or 6 different titles that are waiting for editors to be assigned to them. And, again, it's just because we all have day jobs, believe it or not. And, we're all writers as well. And we're all working our butts off to get the best stories out there that we possibly can, both our own as well as those of the phenomenal authors who submit their work to us. So um, that's just like an incredibly long and convoluted answer to your
A much better answer,
relatively
though.
no. Rod says, from what I've seen, Running Wild is very generous with royalty percentage. Well, thanks. Yeah, and for those of you watching who don't know, we um, the royalties that we provide, and royalty in layman's terms is generally speaking net revenue, right? So that's how much money the publisher makes off of the sales of the books. And a large publisher, it's usually around 10 or 15%, and we offer 40%. So that's what Rod is referencing. He asks again, I had no idea. Thank you for clarifying. My story was accepted quite a long time ago, and I haven't heard anything. I do understand day job getting in the way. Hey Rod, if your story was accepted to one of the short story anthologies, do me a favor and ping us through Submittable so that we know that you're still waiting. Because I know Ben is finishing up the short story anthologies now. I think he was planning on having it done this I think it was this week or next week. But it would be, it would be helpful to have a better understanding of like what who's waiting, if that makes sense. So, yep. Cool. Wow, great questions. Um anything that you want to chat about, Peter,
I wish there was, but right now nothing. Nothing's on the top of my mind.
Well, admittedly, I am quite thankful that the elections are, at least this round, well, they're mostly over. I mean, there's still some things hanging out there, but yeah. Um, Don McIntyre says, "Hey guys, is it true that if I buy copies of my book to sell at local events, they do not count on real sales?" Yeah, that's right. And depending on your publisher, like we can't, um, like Don, if you sign with us and you come to us and you say, "Hey, I want some books at wholesale," right? I want to buy books at wholesale. We can't sell them to you with the intent of you selling them at either an event or selling them in general, because that goes in, puts us in breach of contract with our distributor, which means we could actually lose all of our distribution rights. And until someone's coming forward with, like, 30,000 books to be sold at retail price, I don't know that it would be worth it to us. Um, and it doesn't, and to your point, it does not count as real sales, because if the retailer isn't selling it through traditional means, it's not recorded as an official sale. Um, so at least not that I'm aware of. Caroline says, just curious, as Ben White has already edited my short story for an anthology long ago, long until is it is published. I
How
think what
long?
you're asking is how long before it's published. um, I again, from what I understood from talking to Ben last week, I think he's planning on getting all the short stories anthologies done, or short stories done for the anthology by end of this week or end of next week. And then usually it's about a month uh, to 2 months for formatting and cover design. And then from there, it's 9 to 12 months before it's published. So we're looking at probably the beginning of 2024. Uh, in order for it to actually make it in for 2023, so next year, we would have to have it in by November 15th of this year, and then it would be published at the end of the year. So, since that's 5 days away, I don't anticipate that we're going to hit that target. Rod Gilly asks, or says, "I really appreciate you helping me to understand how things work. I'm sure you hear a lot of silly questions, but for myself, I don't know enough to know what is a silly question and what's not." Honestly, Rod, I don't think there are any silly questions. I think the key is really just coming into everything with an open mind, because I think every publisher has a slightly different model, and especially independent publishers and smaller publishers. So it's better that you ask the questions so that you know what's going on, and what it's leading into, versus walking into it with a bunch of assumptions. So no, it's great. You should absolutely ask questions.
Exactly. Ask away. It's a silly question. Doesn't matter. You want to know the answer. It's going to get you that much more involved in the process. You'll know a little bit more about publishing. So, I mean, as long as you continue and commit to your writing, by all means, ask whatever questions you want to know the answer to, because you're never going to get an answer to a question that you don't ask.
That's right. Yeah, that's 100%. Um, oh, I thought of another something else that had come up recently. Um, anyway, while I'm trying to remember, uh, guys, go ahead and this is again, run wild with us. Ask us anything. I'm Lisa Kastner. I'm here with Peter Wright. We're here with you guys on Thursdays, 5 p.m. Pacific time, 8 p.m. Eastern time. Feel free to go ahead and ask any kind of questions that you may have. Typically, we get questions around publishing and editing and so on. But again, you can ask us anything you'd like. We've had a couple times when someone came on and asked if we would be willing to speak at their writers conference or writers group. Absolutely, just let us know. Um, you know, again, we're more than happy to come out. So now I remember what it was. Um, I recently I have we've been around for like 7 years, so this is kind of interesting to me, or almost 7 years. Recently, I've had a couple of authors and one or two agents come back and ask about print runs. And that really surprised me because, at least based on my conversations with friends who are, really well established authors who are with larger houses, um, and I mean, maybe there are still some smaller publishers that do print runs. Sorry, but from what I understand, and this is actually the model that we use as well. Um, so typically, what happens is we will we submit everything, all the descriptions and all the metadata, so that it's then shared out with the um, retailers and libraries and um, you know schools and the whole nine yards, and they do pre-orders. And what the our distributor does is they look at, okay, comparative titles, how did those similar titles sell, and then they also look at what are the um, number of pre-sales that they've gotten so far. And then based on that, they'll come back to us and make a recommendation and just say, hey, you've got 400 or 5,000 pre-sales or pre-orders, so you should have a first set of print done at, like, I don't know, 12,000 or 15,000, so that they can also we can also more effectively respond to those uh, additional sales. And then every month we do the same analysis, right? So they look at historically how many books have sold, is there a back order, and so on. The whole reason there used to be such a thing as a print run is because back in the day, you had to set up, a printing press. And, that was a heck of a lot of work. I mean, imagine Benjamin Franklin, setting up all that kind of stuff. And it also took a really, really long time to actually put in, to actually print these books. Nowadays, I mean, you could print hundreds of books in a day. Heck, I'm sure probably within hours. So there isn't the same kind, it's not the same kind of labor. It's not the same kind of, uh, it's not the same model. The other thing to keep in mind too is because of the way books used to be bound, there was a limitation in terms of number of pages that you could have, which is why you'll find, at least for a very long time, uh, books were only printed, especially hardbound, if they were under, I think it was 110,000 words, right? Now, because of the flexibility with the way books are published today, they can do paperback or something similar to a paperback, or similar to a hardback, with a much not much larger, but for like 120 or 150,000 words. Excuse me. So as long as your publisher has a manufacturer who can support it, you can actually write some uh, pretty big stories. So CJ Grant asks, would you be willing to Zoom into a high school creative writing class? Of course, we'd love to. Just go ahead and CJ, do me a favor and message me in the Facebook app, and give me some details, and then and let me know if there's anyone specific that you want to have in the Zoom call, and we'll more than happy to do it. So Rod Gilly says, I'm working on a paranormal thriller, and a YA fantasy novella. Does Running Wild publish these types of stories? Yes. You just described two cross genres, and Running Wild specifically publishes cross genre. RIZE specifically publishes stories that are more solidly within a genre, written by those from underrepresented groups. So you've got flexibility there. Caroline says, for the books coming out in 2024, how does the process work? I was contacted for endorsements by a gal, and I gave her 4 of them a couple months ago. Never heard anything more. Uh, I'm not sure I understand the question, um, but I'll take a stab at it. If someone came to you for you to endorse stories, right? In other words, you writing a blurb, um, it would depend on, uh, and once you've provided it, usually the author will provide it to the publisher, and then it's included in either on the cover, or they may add pages in the beginning of the book, uh, outline with all the endorsements. Usually that's done. Well, I mean, it kind of depends. I mean, usually it's done at least 6 months, 4 to 6 months before the publication date. But if you provided it far in advance, then then I'm sure that the publisher is happy to integrate it with the pre-existing material, and then they'll just see, where it makes sense to use that, right? Does it make sense to include it in promos to, libraries and booksellers? Meaning the endorsement. Um, so no, she wanted me to provide endorsements for my book. Oh, so you're talking. Hey, Caroline, can you do me a huge favor? I love you so much, and you come in with these great questions, but they're very unique to you. And I don't want to reveal things that are that could potentially be very personal to you. So my ask is, if you would please, instead of using this forum to ask questions like this, just email me, because I'm almost positive you have my email. I just don't want to put you in an awkward position. So, and again, that's why we're here. Meaning, like, that's why you can connect with us directly through our email. And you can actually even ask her what goes on. I just, like I said, I just don't want to put you in an awkward position. So, um, cool. Okay. Um, any other questions, guys? It's only we've got a little under rather a half hour to go. So happy to, I mean, unless it's, personal, happy to answer more questions. Rod Gilly says, "May I share your show on my platform, Twitter, Facebook, and such?" Absolutely. Please feel free to. I think, Rod, you're signing in through YouTube. Um, you should see a library of more of our live Ask Us Anythings, and you're more than welcome to kind of go through those and see if there are others that have more content that you find valuable for those on your platforms. And same for anybody watching. If you think this is valuable, please feel free to go ahead and share it on on your social media or other online platforms, and it that would be great. So,
Cool.
uh, and I'm trying to think if there's any other big topics that have come up recently. Um, lately I've gotten a lot of questions around. Um, I've gotten a lot of questions around uh, like Publishers Weekly and like do we send out press releases? So we typically do. Uh, we work with an agency, and the agency handles all the licensing. And so typically, what happens is once your book is done, um, because again, remember, you don't really want to have announcements come out too far in advance. So typically, once the book is finalized between the author and the editor, we send that final copy as an advanced review copy out to our agency. And what they do is they then use that along with, the back jacket copy and the log line and all the other material that typically goes along with a book. They send that out to their primary contacts with uh, all the different agencies, both in Hollywood and in New York and internationally, just to kind of see if this is the kind of story that they're really into right now. And then it also enables them to have it on hand so that they get a chance to like read it and go over it to see, so that they have it at top of mind as they're continuing their conversations and their negotiations. So, um, would anyone at Running Wild be willing to check out my YouTube show, relax and chat, and consider being a guest? I certainly don't expect a yes, but don't know if you don't ask. Hey Rod, totally go ahead and feel free to message me in the Facebook chat. And I'd be more than happy to check it out. Like give me a link to your YouTube show, and then we can share. I'll share it with my acquisition editors, and we can see who may be interested. So, uh, Don asks, any opinion on the blocking of the merger between Penguin Random House and Simon and Schuster? Any benefit for a smaller press? I don't know. What do you think?
I think it's a good thing because the more publishers that are out there, the more better chance you have of getting your work published.
Mm.
When things merge, then you got more channels to go through. I really haven't spent much time researching this or digging into this, but it's just something that I've experienced or I've heard experienced, something I've heard happening to other writers.
No, that's a great point. I mean, uh, I've been part of conversations recently regarding it, and people made some awesome points. One point was to Peter's point. It's increased competition, so higher likelihood of getting picked up. Also, it enables the um, potentially for the author to have more choices, right? So you may get an offer over here, and then you get an offer over here. So then you can bring them, bring it together and kind of see who's going to give you the best offer. It also, historically, when there have been mergers like this in the past, what's happened is your uh, the content creators value goes down, if that makes sense. In other words, you're not going to get paid the same amount that you would have been paid if they stayed separate. Another big, from a small press perspective, we were actually at one point, or we have been looking at, because Penguin actually offers their distribution services, their manufacturing services to small publishers, believe it or not, as like a type of service. And originally we were kind of looking at that because it's like, hey, it's Penguin, right? How great would that be? And then one of our leadership team made a great point that uh, they have acquired so many small and mid-sized presses in through the years that you end up being a cog in the wheel, right? So any kind of like more personal attention, any kind of, having someone that you can talk to directly if you're having a challenge or if you want to better understand something or what have you, very decreased likelihood that we would have that kind of service from them, because again, to Penguin, they've got books selling in the millions or hundreds of thousands. So to have a small publisher or a mid-sized publisher join them, that's like, pennies to them. So there isn't really, so along those veins, there really isn't an advantage at all to a smaller mid-sized press, or to an author. What I do find interesting is that Penguin came back and they were like, we're going to fight this. This is a complete advantage to, blah, blah, blah. And no one has been able to explain it, how this would be an advantage, not that I'm aware of, to anyone other than Penguin and Simon and Schuster. But yeah. Um, CJ Grant asks, what sorts of promotional activities have you found to be the most valuable once a book is available? Do you want to no.
All that I come up with is word of mouth.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. I recently um attended a like an online conference with someone who, like, he actually he's in charge of marketing. Like, he runs a marketing and advertising agency for for uh for independent authors, but also for some small presses. And actually, to Peter's point, what he said was, look, if you're a small, if you are a small press or an unknown author, you've got to get you have to go to wherever your potential fans are. So whether that means that you are, doing things like live streams or YouTube podcasts or Twitter campaigns or whatever the case may be, you
Bookstore
need to
readings.
bookstore readings, exactly. You need to go out there and do it, because in today's market, uh readers and fans, they want to hear from the author. They don't want to hear from the publisher. They don't care what the publisher has to say. And understandable, right? Because if you think about it, I don't know where you're watching this from, but LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, think about all the ads that are running now. I mean, it's crazy. So and a lot of it's like completely irrelevant, so it's just a total turnoff. That said, um that really, that push really needs to happen from an author perspective. Now, from an editor perspective, and as well as book signings, right? And actually, once we've had some authors who had success with doing like a group book signing. It could either be a group book signing with other authors with Running Wild, or with friends of theirs who are with other publishers. But it's like, some local booksellers that they have a relationship with. And I just think that's smart. Um, the what well, at least what Running Wild does is we always send books out um for reviews, podcasts. We actually are starting new campaigns where we're sending them out to, like, we're offering advanced review copies to some retailers and to libraries, so that that we know are already fans of ours, right? They've already bought books from us, to kind of like build on that relationship. So, it's really a blend of the traditional marketing and publicity with things that are, I guess you might consider them to be more modern-ish, I guess. So, let's see. Rod asks, I've said an awful lot here. Thank you so much for such friendly and honest answers. I will send a message via Submittable. Hope to hear from someone there. Absolutely. I'm usually the one responding, so I'm pretty sure you'll hear back. Um, Rod said, the other shows I've seen had you and Ben. I got here a bit late. Who is a nice fellow in this show? This nice fellow is Peter Wright. And Peter is one of our acquisition editors as well. So he and Ben work hand in hand in selecting the stories that we acquire for Running Wild, and also provide advisement. So, because we're soon going to make an announcement about a new acquisitions editor for RIZE, and so they also both advise on RIZE as well. So, and we've had times when all of our guys were able to make it. Well, not all of our guys, but our acquisition editors all were able to make it, and one or two of our like standard editors, which was awesome. You know, just really great conversation. So, but yeah, Peter's the bomb. Like how? Now I can't even remember anymore. I recruited you and Ben in to be editors. What was it, like 2014 or something? No, that can't be right.
No. I
2018, 2019.
think it's 2019. Yeah. You put
Wow.
out a call saying anybody that any of your authors want to be an editor, and well, Ben and I were already editors, but we're talking about acquisition editors or editing in general.
Editing in general, and then acquisition editors. So both.
Okay, so she asked if any of her authors wanted to be an editor for the press, and I raised my hand for sure, and Ben raised his hand, and she goes, "Okay, there's going to be a test." I'm like, a test about writing. I think I can handle that one. So we had every editor on staff had to pass a test about their editing abilities, how they approach a story, how they approach the author communication, and how they approach feedback for the author. It's maybe the same thing, but
Mm,
one of the things that Lisa stresses that we all accept is that we don't try to change the author's voice. We keep the author's voice true. As long as we stick with that, we can suggest things, we can ask things, whatever, but we stay true to the author's voice.
mhm,
And as far as acquisition editors going, she asked the same questions of her editor pool, which is smaller. And I raised my hand, and Ben raised his hand, and she said, "Well, I was only going to hire one, but you guys, Ben's really cool, and Pete knows a little bit about what he's talking about, so she hired us both."
oh, give me a break. You two are both brilliant. So,
I'm not
uh,
as good as Ben, but okay.
I mean, the whole reason we even do the like the test thing, which I know I've surprised people in the past who weren't familiar with how we bring on editors, but
It's a great practice. I really believe in it. I think it's a good idea.
yeah, I mean, I actually know huge anyone from huge bestsellers all the way to like unknowns tell me these horror stories about having their stories acquired and assigned an editor they didn't know, and the editor basically rewrote the whole thing or made recommendations that made it clear that the editor was not um, familiar with different aspects of craft, and but was adamant like, no, 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 you absolutely have to make these changes. And I don't want us to be in that uh I don't want us to work with anybody in that vein, right? In my opinion, this should be a collaboration. So,
Hmm.
I mean, and that said, if an editor comes to me or an author comes to me and they say, this isn't working out, then, I'll go and see if there's someone, if I'll find someone else to, finish a workout. I've had twice when I actually did it. Um, just because for whatever reason it the it didn't work. But by and large, yeah, it's it seems to be really effective. So, as indicated by like, winning awards and being named best of the year and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, cool. Great questions, guys. Um, you guys have us for 10 more minutes. Uh, I'd say toss in your questions into the comments. Let us know what your thoughts are. If you have a question that's a little more personal, feel free to go ahead and message me in Facebook. and Facebook Messenger, and I'll do my best to answer your questions. So,
I guess the one thing that just came to mind is from the author side of it, what's their ability or what rights, what privileges they have when working with the author or working with the editor. And my perspective is the author is in charge. I mean, not go ordering around or whatnot, but staying true to the author's voice. And if the author isn't comfortable with something or doesn't like a suggestion, he does not or she does not have to listen to it. I mean, give a reason why you don't like it, but you don't have to listen to it. You keep your story your way, and you can go against everything the editor says. That's perfectly fine. It might result in a less lesser quality novel, lesser quality story, but that is the author's right, and we do not take that away from anybody. And anybody that shirks away from that or shies away from that, I give you full reason to just push forward. Just be true to yourself, be true to your story, because it's your story, it's your art.
yeah, absolutely. And um, we've had some authors who are like, no, I don't want to do any of this. But to Ben's point, it really what's critical is it's this again, it's a collaboration, right? So just explain to the editor what was your vision for something, right? Because there might be something about either craft or writing or whatever the case may be that either that you may not understand or you may not remember, and that's okay, right? Again, there may be something that you're trying to accomplish with that section or that technique that isn't quite working. So by talking through it with your editor, it enables you guys to kind of come up with potentially a better way, right? So, Caroline asks, how does the process go once you choose book and a contract signed? Sure. So once the books are chosen and the contracts are signed, we then identify an editor to work with you. We then introduce you to the editor, and vice versa. You then have typically a call with that editor so you guys can talk through what your process is going to be to work together. Usually, the editor will go through and do at least an initial round of recommendations and edits. And then we'll come back to you. And depending on the significance of the edits, like if it's they're relatively minor, they may just, hand it back to you and say, hey, let me know what you think. Or if it's more significant, like it's thematic, they may recommend that you have a phone call so you can kind of talk through stuff. Once you and your editor have agreed that, yep, this is done, then usually it's the editor who will then send us the final version. And at that point, it goes to our product managers, and our product managers then manage the process of working with the author on back jacket copy, working with the author on log lines, on blurbs, on getting any like blurbs, any kind of reviews. They also work with the author on stuff like um, because we have a publisher's questionnaire and a marketing template. So to kind of help you walk through your thoughts on, how what would be best, how could we be more or most effective in terms of marketing and publicity, as well as how can the author be most effective in terms of marketing and publicity. Once all of that is done, it's then submitted to the manufacturer and the distributor. And what happens is typically our product manager will come back to the author and ask, do you have preference in terms of time or date to publish the work? Now, understand that with that question comes the underlying statement of, it's got to be, it has to be after a specific date, right? And again, after that specific date is to ensure that your story is getting full representation by the sales and marketing team for the distributor. So there's no advantage to you or to anybody to pick a date that's sooner than that. Rod says, I have worked with and spoken with at least 20 editors. Your editing style and what you've said is the best. Oh, cool. So glad. you find it you find it valuable. I've just uh like I said, I've heard stories from, huge bestsellers who clearly know what they're doing, of an editor coming forward and saying things like, well, you can't do alternate points of view in a novel. Well, yes, you can. There's a whole lot of different ways you can do that. And it just made it very clear, statements like that or comments like that just make it very clear that that editor probably is not the right selection for the work. So, and again, if you are assigned an editor and you don't feel as though it's a good fit, then I don't think there's any problem in going back to the publisher and just saying, hey, this is what happened, this is the vision for the story, this is why we're doing it this way or why it was written this way. I'd love your guidance on how to move forward, and hopefully they'll, excuse me, provide alternatives. So Rod says, my books will be ready in 2023. I'm thinking market like crazy from 3 months from release date to 3 months after release date. Is that a good plan? Actually, a better plan is market like crazy 4 to 6 months before the release date and 4 to 6 months after, and then take it from there. Because if your work starts winning awards or it's getting a lot of attention, then you want to be able to pivot and do things like, highlight all these great things that are happening, right? Um, like we had an author who her book was named among the best uh, published in May of this year. Well, heck, we put that out everywhere, right? Because um, it really, and it worked. I mean, it did cause an uplift in sales. So you just want to have your baseline, and then again be ready to pivot and to increase or adjust based on the kind of responses. Great questions, guys. Thank you. All right, you got us for 3 more minutes. Dawn says, thanks, guys. Have a good night and wish me luck at my book launch party on Saturday. You'll be fabulous.
You'll be
I,
awesome.
you will absolutely be awesome. And I can't wait to see. I hope someone takes pictures, and I can't wait to see them posted. And don't forget to tag me, tag Running Wild, tag your editor, right, so that we can help spread the word about your book launch. Rod says, thank you so much. There is so much I don't know, but I am willing to learn. Again, my caveat is this is the Running Wild and RIZE way. It doesn't mean that this is the only way. I mean, I know plenty of other publishers that have different viewpoints. So I think, again, if you're interested in working with a publisher and you're not familiar with how they do things, just go back and do your homework, right? And find out, like, how do they normally work, and is that a way that you're interested in working? Because you may encounter someone that on the surface it sounds fabulous, and then as soon as you start talking to them, you realize, oh, this is not this is not a good fit. So awesome. Well, you know what? With that, I think we'll wrap things up. I want to again thank Peter for generously joining us, and looking forward to talking to you guys soon.
Cool.